Welcome back to, I think this is episode 5 now of the Big Gay Overalls podcast. Stories of love, pride, identity, everything really. And today I'm very excited, and I promised this a couple of weeks ago, but then life got in the way and then we were sick. But now we have the one and only Mrs. Sharon Kirkman on the podcast. How are you, my love?
Thank you, baby. How about you?
I'm great. As we sit in opposite rooms in the house, we're not quite up to the tech levels of Glennon and Abby yet, where we can do it sitting in the same space. But, you know, this is good for a start. You've got the dog, so that's a good thing.
If you can hear panting, it's not me.
Not that kind of recording.
Yeah.
It's our
You have to pay for that one.
This is going to be trouble. Our beloved Rottweiler Dottie is also in the room with Sharon, and she may be a little hectic. She may not. We'll see how this goes.
Yeah.
She doesn't like not being the center of attention.
Yeah.
So, as you know, and for people who are new to the podcast, I guess, this podcast was created for me to talk through, you know, my identity, my story, my struggles with, you know, realizing who I was and coming out and doing all those sort of things. And along the way, you know, we connected. Yeah. And I met you, which was great. It's perfect. It's wonderful.
Yeah.
So I guess today it's really a good chance to talk through that from your eyes a little bit. Like you've had a front row seat to my turmoil at times and my victories and my journey through this. And, you know, clearly without your incredible support, wouldn't be here now. But also even, you know, your perspectives on what it's like to come out later in life. You had, you know, not a similar journey, but you came out later in life. And we were just talking about that as we drove home today in our Subaru, in a break between Melissa Etheridge CDs, I joke, about, you know, that coming out later in life does have a few different hurdles, I guess, and comes with a whole heap of different layers, which the goal of this podcast too is that somebody else may listen to this and get something from it. So it's good to have your perspective.
And I think the, you know, the idea of identity, like, I think for both of us, and most of the things it's both of us, because lots of things we've had similar experiences, but I think, you know, that idea of identity that usually you form fairly young, at a young age, that we didn't necessarily have that. And then coming out, trying to figure out whether, like, you let go of all the old stuff and adopt a new identity. But then, you know, you mentioned it in your last podcast about the judgment that some people have in the community. Mm-hmm. It was hard enough just for us, I think, to work out for ourselves, and probably something we still struggle with a little bit and question, you know, should we have more gay friends, and should we participate in gay things? Like what's the right thing?
Yeah.
Sorry? Yeah, are we that kind of gay?
Because I remember, you know, quite early on we watched Mardi Gras and we're like, oh, we don't think we're that kind of gay. We're like, okay, cool. We kind of know, like, we're definitely not partiers and we're not into the party scene, but it's like, well, where do you fit, particularly being older?
I watched a little clip of Hannah Gadsby yesterday, and she's saying about her watching the Mardi Gras, and she's sitting at home in a rural town watching it on a TV and thinking, okay, well, that's well and good, but where do all the quiet gay people hang out, and where's the event for them? That, you know, like a nice quiet cup of tea and not going to the pub and partying and stuff like that. So, you know, the way I see it is that, you know, there's so many aspects of identity. Like, it's not just one single thing, and we very much don't label ourselves or full on identify with that identity, that it's one part of who we are.
Yeah.
But and there's all these other parts as well.
And, you know, it's interesting because in the last episode, which you referenced, like, I did talk about all the different labels that can be overwhelming, particularly, you know, when you first come out, people refer to you as a baby gay and you're expected to figure out who's who and what's what and how not to offend somebody or what to say or what not to say. And I'm in a couple of groups for like late to life lesbians, and a lot of them struggle with well, I don't know if this is my space, but I wasn't happy with where I was. But I feel like that this is my space, but now I don't feel like I fit in. And and it can be quite hard for somebody who's been through marriage and then having to exit that and divorce and stuff like that, like to then find another partner. I mean, I was very lucky. Like, I pretty much pulled the lever and bang, there you were. And I didn't have to go through some of that drama and that like searching. I guess we connected and we just seemed to have fit,
Yeah.
And not to say that we're perfect and not to say we haven't had challenges, because we've certainly had those, particularly when I was going through the process of coming out and nobody knew, and I knew some of that secrecy stuff weighed really heavily on you. And, we had challenges that we had to navigate, but we kind of just, because we didn't have a whole external support, like I certainly didn't go into any Facebook groups posting about, we don't know how to, we just figured it out together as a team going, what are you feeling? How does this make you feel? Okay, how do we change it, solve for it, whatever? And we would just work it out together. And not everything was an instant fix.
And, we've been watching Love is Blind recently. And
don't judge us.
We're both quite fascinated in how people work and how relationships work. And it's really interesting, the impact of family and friends on that relationship. And if you do have that, we called it bubble time. So we had our time in the bubble where it was just you and I, and it didn't matter about other people. And I think that was a really special time and really created a solid foundation.
Yeah,
and I think we've got to come back to that too.
We had that time where we could just figure out who each other was and what we wanted without, going, oh, how to impress this person or that person, or, when they layer their expectations on it, can be really hard. And it was really interesting to me, and we probably haven't really talked about it since or at the time, but I remember asking you, because I had been through the process of, I had to come out to my mother, clearly to my ex-husband, to friends, to felt endless. And I remember having a conversation with you, with your beautiful godmother, Marilyn, and saying well, how was it for you when you had to come out? And Marilyn said, well, we didn't know till we got a wedding invitation. Or, Sharon's met somebody and just turned out to be called Lisa, like she said. Yeah. So you didn't really, with your extended family, so much have to, and you've got quite a big extended family, like your dad came from a family of 18. That's a lot of conversations with people. It was no big deal, and it was just like, hey, here's my partner. Her name's Lisa. And then we sent wedding invitations and nobody batted an eyelid, but you never had to have, I mean, I'm sure at some point you had some formal conversations with like your mum and whatever, but there was never a formal conversation with those people. And it was just like, this is who I am.
Yeah.
And they just accepted 100%.
Yeah. I think, people had questioned my sexuality since I was sort of a teenager, and, I never really got caught up in that. And, we're talking recently about growing up in rural communities and the time that we grew up, that it wasn't socially acceptable to be gay. And there were still stories of people being bashed, of people being disowned, those sort of things were still part of our narrative. And
even in just general conversation, the terms people, there goes the dog, the terms that people would use to describe someone who they either thought wasn't straight were quite derogatory.
Yeah.
And so you're like, well, why do I want to put up my hand to get that kind of deal?
And look, for me, I don't think there was really any role models either.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't see gay people in community. I didn't, have that much exposure. So it didn't seem to be an option. So,
and it's something that was whispered about, wasn't it? As like, oh yeah, that's she's the strange woman on the corner who, you know, is the town dyke or whatever. Like,
I remember when I was in, you know, late teens, early 20s, and my brother was dating a girl and she was bisexual, and it was like, that's the only gay person in Scone. Like,
the only gay in the village.
Like, that's how foreign it was. So I think that really impacts on what's allowed to be your identity at that age. So, you know, I think I just buried that because it wasn't accepted and wasn't the norm, and was so out of touch with that it wasn't even on the radar, the gaydar.
The gaydar. And it's really funny as well when we talk about that, like, we didn't have role models. And, you know, in the town I grew up in Roma, Western Queensland, where, you know, if someone was a female and they were unmarried past a reasonable age, then, well, she must be a dyke. And then anyone who was also single and friends with that person, then you must be with them. And that's, you know, a label I got stuck with a lot because of people who happen to be my friends. And I can assure you, without a shadow of a doubt, they definitely weren't gay. But because they didn't drag their conquests, you know, around town, or, you know, we used to go to Toowoomba a lot and go away a lot, like, people didn't know, so they made shit up. But then you would hear the way that they spoke about that person and you go, well, even if I was, I wouldn't say to you because, like, you have such a negative view of that. Like, and I couldn't have necessarily, the same as you, not necessarily, we push that down, not necessarily put our finger on that's what we felt. So as you navigated your way through, you know, various like chapters of life, at what point did you go, yep, this is actually where I feel most comfortable?
I probably had some question marks in my 20s, and like, because I always valued female friendships more than anything. Probably because there was more to it than that. Like, I knew that that's where I needed to get my needs met. And some of that stuff comes down to my relationship with my mum and, you know, those sorts of things, not just about sexuality. But it wasn't until, I'm just thinking how long ago it was, probably 6 or so years ago, just that I was talking to someone and I was like hit with a sledgehammer of, I think I have feelings for this person. Like, I like them more than that. And I was like blown away. It was such a shock. And it was scary, and it was a decision about whether I proceed with that or whether I bury that. And for me, part of my story is having an abuse history. So, you know, as part of that, having a period of time where I wasn't in any relationships, you know, and that's a confusion about multiple things there. So to open up to that was a real big thing, and it felt really scary.
And particularly as you're doing it like later in life, it seems harder to have those conversations. Like when you're in your 20s and you're going out and you're looking to meet somebody, you know, you're 10 foot high and bulletproof, but it would feel like when you feel that feeling like, oh, I think I'm attracted to this person, like, oh shit, maybe they are, maybe they aren't. Like, it really sets up a big precipice if they're not, like, you get that rejection, you're like, oh, and they're like, whoa, no, I'm not like that at all, or whatever. Like, you know, and I've read stories where people have had that, but it's that extra layer of complexity that you can't just go, hey, I like you, let's go hang out.
Yeah.
Because
and then the same as you, the struggles with what sort of lesbian are you and what sort are you interested in? I don't know. Like, I haven't been this before. Like, I'm just trying to work it out. And so many people had preconceived ideas about the way I was and the type I was and the type that I'd be interested. It's just like they put you straight in a box and this is you. And I was just like, oh, I don't know. And like at times I sort of tried to fit into that sort of masculinity butch thing. And then that didn't quite fit. And the way I see it is that there's different aspects of me, and I don't have to be one particular thing all the time. It's just how I feel.
Yeah. And it's also about like when people are questioning about what box you're in, you're like, well, I just like this person because they're a good person. Like if I happen to look like this way and do this, does that mean I can only be attracted to people who look like that? Because that doesn't do it for me. Yeah. And I've always like early on in my journey, and I think I said this to you, I would have described myself as I'm attracted to a person, not a gender. Like it doesn't matter, but like clearly the gender does matter, but it, for me, but it's still about the person. Like, and I don't care in the community what label they have attached to them, how they would describe. It's like, are you a good human? Do I feel like I connect with you on that level? Can we be friends?
Yeah, really, I think it's about that open-mindedness and not having that judgment and the rigidity. And what's most important to you is that person, not the way they look, the way they dress, that sort of stuff,
And I think we had a lot of conversations earlier about, values and stuff. And, I know at the time that we kind of connected, you had some other things bubbling away and we were just going to be friends. It's like, you're a really good friend. And I wasn't interested in competing because I didn't think that I was worthy of, like, I'm never going to win anything. So I was just being me. I was just being, what I do for my friends, I check in, make sure everyone's okay, see if I can help, like whatever. And you had some challenging times, like when we connected and you had some struggles. And I was just, reaching out, particularly when, not long after we first connected, your mum had a fall and you're at the hospital. I'm like, oh, who's there with you? No one. Huh. So then I'd mess you, oh, how's your mum? How's you? Da, 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 Not for any other purpose, sure. Just not for any other purpose and just to be a good person. But I think that period of time we got to see, like, you saw the values of other people and then you saw other values who were doing it with you. There was no expectation that I should be interested or care for you because we were just, casual friends, I guess, for want of a better term. Mates. Good mate. But so I think we had that time to connect on our values and go, oh, this feels like a solid foundation. Yeah. Because you see who somebody is in the, when the shit hits the fan.
Yeah. And I think, you've got a couple of examples of sort of what happened at that time, that someone that I was close with had turned their phone off and didn't answer their phone, and someone else wasn't really interested. They were just interested in their own stuff. And there was an incident where I nearly hit someone riding their bike in front of me, and I was stressed out, and you stayed on the phone with me all the way until I'd driven into home. And that meant a great deal to me, that you would show up and be there for me when I needed it.
Yeah. And, again, I had no skin in the game. I was just being a good person going, wow, you sound really distraught. I've got the time. I've got the capacity. I'm just going to sit on the phone till you get home safe because, excuse me, that can be quite a rattling experience.
Yeah.
But I think having that no expectation for anything, down the track, and you had definitely said that, you're one of your good friends who was later, best person at our wedding. She said to you, don't fall in love with her because she'd seen you on this roller coaster of these whatever. And you said, oh, no, I'm definitely not. She's a nice person, but definitely not. And yet here we are, been married for 18 months now. Cool.
Yeah.
How'd that work out for you?
apparently I can't be trusted.
Yeah. But I think that's a good story in that it does show that when people are like hitting these barriers, like I can't find someone, I can't find someone, it's like, stop looking.
Yeah.
Like, stop looking, but also pay attention to the people around you who you may be dismissing because they don't fit into a particular type or category. Well, I'm not supposed to like that sort of person. There's no supposed to or anything around it. It's like, just stop looking and form a foundation with someone based on your shared values. And you do that through conversation.
And we just became friends, and you showed up when I needed you, and we had deep talks and supported each other, and that just naturally grew from there. You know, it's pretty hard to not love someone when you see inside their soul.
And I did make the comment to you. So for those that aren't aware, Sharon does work as a counsellor. She has a certain skill set. It reminds me of Liam Neeson. And I found myself telling you things that I've never told anyone else. And I'm like, what the hell? Like, and I'd be typing something like, and it's like an out of body experience. Like, why am I even doing this? Like, why? And it was, I think I said the word to you once. It was like you had just sliced me down the middle and just filleted me and opened me up and went, all right, let's have a look, see what the pieces of this puzzle are. And I couldn't understand how you create an environment because I'm always been a very guarded person and very particularly around this. Like I was always very, well, no one can know. This is my big secret and da-da-da. And you just got it all out and like super fast. And, you know, you do have some set of professional skills, but just the way that you would ask and bring up topics was not as a, well, tell me why this. Why did you decide to do this? It was a very different way of doing that.
And I just loved you where you were and just accepted you. Like I didn't have any agenda. Like we were just friends. So I was just trying to be there for you and help you work out your stuff. And just, support you as best that I could.
And so I guess our relationship for both of us was the first time that people in our networks and our families had seen us, you know, be with somebody in this sort of relationship. Like, so my family had seen me get married and, you know, had boyfriends before and whatever. But this is the first time they really saw us in a different light. And I remember that when we'd sort of first started to kick things off, I guess. And, you know, even your mum, bless her soul, would ask you, you know, different questions. And I remember the first time I met her and your sister-in-law at the time, and our ex-sister-in-law had gone up to visit her and she goes, oh, what'd you think of the girlfriend? And I was just the girlfriend at that point. Now everyone was a bit wary, I think. You know, we had dinner with your twin and his then partner, and it was very nothing from him, but from her it was very interrogatory and like I felt like she was asking questions not to get to know me, but to try and trip me up or to find out, you know, what the story is. And, you know, but for you, like I had a whole community of people around me that I owned, you know, the gym that I owned. And it's like they are my they were my family at that time, and many of them still are. So it was like I got to and had to then connect with your blood family who hadn't necessarily seen you in a stable, you know, relationship. And then this group of people who've known me for X amount of years as one way, and now it's like, oh, now it's going to be different. And then you had to integrate yourself in that community day to day as well.
Yeah. And I think, you know, one of the challenges was distance. So I lived up at Harvey Bay, so I was a fair way away. And given the intensity of our connection, it's hard for us to be away from each other. So I made a challenging decision to leave where I was and to move to Brisbane to give our relationship a chance. But that involved leaving that family behind and leaving friends and work and those sorts of things. So all that stability was sort of out the window. But I was just like, I have to try. I have to try and make it work, whether it works or not.
And we had a lot of conversations around that, because I said at that point in time, like, I don't necessarily want you to upend your life just for me. I think I told you to stay away from me at one point. I said, you should run.
I just did it. I just like, this is what needs to happen. So I'm just applying for jobs. Now I've got a job, and then we work somewhere for me to live. Like,
all happening. And yeah, I think, I'd said to you very early on, you should run, because I will cause chaos in your life, because that's what I perceived that I did at that time. And you're like, well, no, let me make the decisions.
I'd already fallen in love with you. There's no chance.
There's no chance. And I wasn't doing that because I didn't feel the same way. It was like, that was me trying to protect you, going, well, I haven't changed the situation I'm in yet. I don't even know how to go about that. I don't even know what to do. Like, I don't want you to. And, you talked about it. And you said, what's the worst thing that can happen is I'll just move back. No big deal. So, and there was no pressure or expectation from you on that end either.
Yeah.
There was no time frame. There was no anything really.
And if you were making the decision based on logic, it was a silly decision. But I'm one to follow my heart. So
yeah,
here we are.
Here we are. And it's turned out to be a great decision.
Yeah.
Because, like, I have spoken on this, and like you clearly know, but, I've never felt more at peace and complete than I do now. And that's not to say that anyone did anything wrong in my former life. That's just not where I fit. That's just not where I belong.
And you've been true to yourself.
And I'd never, in 46 years of life at that time, I'd never figured that out. So in this process, not only have I had to figure out who I am, what this means, and it's like, well, who am I really as someone's significant other?
It's been really interesting to watch your growth and changes over that period from where you were. And I think it's, it's important to look at how to support someone through that. So I was fairly confident with who I was, and it was about Todd's come in. It was about letting you work things out in your time and just being there for you and, supporting you, with no pressure at all for you to have to do anything. Because you were doing what you needed to do to feel safe. So my job was to support you in that and help you work through to where you're comfortable. And sometimes really that's involved challenging discussions.
Yes. Well, of which there were many, but, it was never like, well, you need to be free of your other stuff within 3 months, or you need to have moved in. Like, the goal was that you moved down and then we would just spend time together and But on the day that you moved, there was a lockdown. So we were locked down for 3 days, like, can't go anywhere. And then I went back to my other home. I spent one night and I was like, I can't go back again. So then I started that process. I remember I went up to do washing and I came home. I said, oh, by the way, I've told my husband that I need to move out for a while and I need to figure out some things. And you were like, you were building a desk at the time. You're like, whoa, like, and that was it. And that's what I would do. I would come home and tell you that I just made a big thing, and you're like, or done a big thing. You're like, okay, how do you feel? And, from then I knew that's where I was meant to be, because I felt so free and so supported to do, whether it be business or personal or other stuff. Like, I was like, okay, is that what you want to do? Cool, let's go do that. Let's see how we make that happen.
Yeah.
And whilst in my previous relationship, no one had ever said, no, you can't do something, but I never felt like I could just do, go and try this or do that. It was like, we need to make sure we're earning to keep the bills paid. It was, operating, now I can look back and go, it was more of a scarcity thing.
Yeah.
But it's like, dot your I's, cross your T's, do all the things that are expected of you still. And we were kind of just existing in that space.
Yeah.
Which isn't good for anyone when you look back on that.
Yeah. And like it was a lot for us to both go through in the early stage of our relationship. And I think both of us tried to work on our own stuff so that didn't make our relationship toxic. So we weren't coming from that insecurity and I don't feel like I'm enough, so you have to do this so that I feel better about myself, those sorts of things. We would talk about, I'm feeling like this, and like I had some insecurities around a couple of things, like and we would talk about that. I didn't expect you to change your behavior or do something different because of that, but I needed to be able to express that,
And that's what we could do, is have that sort of open conversation and checking in all the time of like, well, what do you feel like? Even today, like you'll sit there and say, how's your heart? How's your soul? How's your mind? And it's just that check-in. And, we do it all the time. Like, how are you going? And because, at the start, you also had a lot of anxiety triggers and stuff, around your history. And they were never when I say never a big deal, that's not to dismiss them, because they were big things for you. But for me to help you navigate them and get you to a place where you had secure attachment and a healthy relationship where they just didn't even pop up their head.
Yeah.
And you could move past some of that past trauma and those things and go, I'm in this secure space. It doesn't worry me if you go and hang out with your friends of afternoon. I'm not going to be stressing that, something bad's going to happen from that or whatever.
Yeah.
And we built that in that bubble.
And look, I think there are a lot of people that have experienced trauma, particularly like sexual abuse trauma, and that will often show up in a relationship and in intimacy. And I just think it's so important to talk and just support each other. So, for me, I didn't know whether those things would ever disappear. But through love and support, we were able to work through those. That's not an issue now.
And it's you being open and willing to, a lot of people don't talk about that stuff because of, shame and all they're like, it's too painful to talk about. But then if they keep pushing it aside, it's going to keep bubbling back up and presenting in all manner of different ways that they don't even realize that some of it is causing, issues in relationships and things like that.
Yeah.
So it's quite challenging, but you were quite open to, because you'd done so much work in therapy and for yourself, for 10 years prior to us even knowing the other existed, you're able to, have the conversation, say, hey, this is what happened to me. This is why I react this way.
Yeah. And look, I didn't even know whether I'd be able to be in a relationship or live with someone, all of those things. Even, when we first started out, where I struggled to sleep in the same bed as you.
Yeah.
And, the challenging conversations, facing all that stuff, it's really hard. But if you trust that person, then you can work through it. And
it's also too, like, I don't want to offend you by saying I don't want to sleep in the same bed as you, but then it's like, where did you go?
Yeah.
But working through that. And then I made that okay. Well, if you can't go to sleep, you need to sleep next, that's fine. I don't feel like that's anything against me kind of deal. But, being able to have those conversations, even like down to us figuring out like how the pantry was organized and things like that. And I would just go in and resort things. And, at first you were like, well, that makes me feel like the way that I do it's not good enough. And that was, never my intention. But I was like, okay, cool. Well, it's no big deal. That's just what I do. So I don't have to do it. That's all good. And then we work through it. And now we do the pantry together. And it's amazing chaos.
Except when I put everything away in the wrong places and not where they're meant to go.
Yeah.
Around we go again.
It's a fluid document. But I think one of our strengths is that we have always been able to laugh. Like 1 minute we can have tears and it's a big, powerful conversation. But I guarantee you, in that moment, there will be someone will say something and we will laugh. And then we'll probably be crying because we're laughing. And I think that's been one of our good strengths is we don't take something that the other person is feeling necessarily personally. Like, I've done something wrong to make you feel that way, but we go, okay, that wasn't my intention. And how do I not do that again?
Yeah.
And, but then we can always still, once we work through that, and that might be a bit sticky, it might take, half an hour of just talking and understanding, and then someone will crack a funny every time.
Yeah.
And we have that foundation where it doesn't have to be, like, I know I joke that, like, if you want to talk, get two women in a relationship, there's no fighting, it's talking, and then add in one is a counselor and one is a behavioral coach. That's where it's all going. But, it's not all deep and meaningful, stuff all the time. Like, we can talk for hours still.
Yeah.
And we don't ever feel like we get sick of it, but it's also fun. Like, we have fun all the time.
I feel like we've turned Big Gay Overalls into couples counselling session.
Well, if you're looking for, please call Sharon. No,
but I think also there is that couple identity.
Yeah.
And that's, that's been a big change for me to identify as us.
Mm-hmm.
And to think from that perspective.
And
rather
than just two people.
Yeah, and not just me. So both of us came from the perspective of we wanted what was best for the other one, and that, has always been our intention.
Which
and sometimes we get stuck on that.
I was going to say, quite often we finish each other's sentences and thoughts, but we do sometimes get tripped up on that because I'm trying to protect you and you're trying to protect me. So then nothing happens because someone's not willing to give and go, okay, well, all right, I'll let you do that for me. And then, go on.
Then we've gone to who's ever needs the greatest.
And that's been a powerful reframe. I remember reading in one of Brene Brown's books is like, there's no 50-50 in a relationship. There's 100%. And some days you might come in and go, I've only got 20%. And I'll go, cool, I've got you covered. I can pick up the other, or, when I was dealing with a lot of stuff at the gym, you'd be like, don't worry about these things. I'll take care of it. Like, it's just it works to be a natural ebb and flow. And you will often say to me, we don't keep score.
Yeah.
Because, I will go, yeah, but I don't do X, Y, Z, and you do all of that. And you're like, yeah, but here are all the other things that you do. Like, when you've come from a lifetime of you need to prove your worth and your value, which I think we both have to a degree, that was a big transition for me, is not having to keep score anymore. And go, like, I have my role and I have my strengths, and I think our strengths complement each other. We're both, you're great at the practical, I'm good at the logistics, and, that's how things work well for us.
Yeah.
And I feel like having to move from that, well, I need to be earning my keep, has been, and I still struggle with that today. Like, I'll hear a comment from someone who's like, says something about, oh, Sharon does everything, Lisa doesn't, or whatever. And that'll sting because that taps into that insecurity that I still have. And you've always been very good at, like, we know what works for us. We know what we're doing. So don't worry about that. They don't spend 24/7 with us to make that decision.
Yeah.
The only person that has to be happy is you and me.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's
and
been
I
good.
think, I think identities, it's true identity is more about who you are, not what you do. You get caught up in I'm a this or I'm a that, but it's actually who you are as a person and your values and the way you live.
And I think our values have been, the thing that brought us together were our values and how aligned we were and who we were as people. And then that's the glue then that's bonded us and allowed us to, get married and, keep pursuing our life openly and freely now, without worrying too much about a label or what people say. It's just, here are Sharon and Lisa and their wife and wifey. like what they are, and the people closest to us just accept us as that. Like, you don't need to have a big conversation. It's just Sharon is Lisa's wife, Lisa is Sharon's wife.
Yeah.
And we're a team, and people know that.
Yeah.
And they accept that, in those that are in our closest circles.
Yeah.
And anyone else who's not in our closest circles, that doesn't really have a place anyway.
Yeah. And I think I pretty much don't really worry about other people too much, about external, about what they think. Like when we went to the barbers last week, and they asked who her sister, she talked about that.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, oh, whatever, I don't care what you think.
Yeah.
And I've always sort of had that attitude.
Yeah.
Whereas
I was like, no, I'm going to set him straight. This is my wife.
Yeah.
Which, I'm proud to call you my wife, clearly. And I love having you as my wife. And I'm like, no, this is my wife. Like, instead of just letting it sort of slide type thing.
Yeah.
I'm proud of who we are and the life and that we have and the people that we are together as well as separately.
It's funny when we went and got your injection for your shoulder and they called me your support person.
Yeah.
Is your support person coming? Probably because they didn't know what label to use. What is she?
Like, yeah, she's coming.
Yeah.
But yeah, and people,
they'd assume it was a husband.
Yes. But yeah, people just don't necessarily know. And it's back to that older school and even some cultural thing. I was like, oh, well, you must be sisters or friends or whatever. Like I remember many, many years ago, I was a member at a golf club and I was friends with these two women and that was good. And I thought they were sisters because someone must have said once they were sisters.
Yeah. And
then I made and this was like 3 or 4 years later, I made a comment to one of their girls. I said, oh, yeah, they're sisters. And they went, you idiot. They're a couple. Like they've been together for 1,000,000 years. And I went, no, they're just sisters, aren't they? And I went, no. And I went, oh, thank you, Dottie, for joining in the podcast. But I was like, oh, and I just totally did. And I remember a couple of years later, after they'd separated, and I was speaking to one because we were good friends at the time, and I told her that story, and she was in stitches. And, at the golf club I was at, there were a group of girls, and they were all gay, and they all played cricket, so we used to just refer to them as cricketers. And I remember one of them, we were having a celebration because she and her wife were going to have a baby, and we were sitting there, and one of the caterers from the kitchen came over and said, oh, what are you celebrating? We're like, oh, such and such is just is going to have a baby. And they're like, oh, but you don't look pregnant. It's like, no, my wife. And she did not know what to say. She's like, we were in stitches. We laughed because you could tell she was just like, I don't even know where to go with this. We've got nothing. So when people don't have something that, and this is where I talked last week about something that fits into the structure, they don't know what to do. So they revert to the next closest thing and then take some time to process it. But I don't think I've experienced too much of that apart from the odd people who are well outside our circle.
Yeah.
And I spoke last week about the assistant at the nursing home, and her comments on that is like, oh, is that you in the photo? You're like, yeah, like we're in the photo. Oh, in our immediate circles, it's just been Lisa and Sharon.
Yeah.
And when I'd said to people, I said, oh, well, I'm actually, I'm in a relationship with Sharon now. They went, yeah, well, duh. Like, it was no big deal. It's just like, and then like we're getting engaged. Okay, great. It was nothing. And I know how excited like your extended, like your aunts in particular, the ones who we're particularly close to, they were just happy that you were happy. Didn't care who it was, man, woman, cat, dog, whatever.
Probably the cat dog would have been gone too far, but
might have been a question or two. But but all they cared about was that you were happy.
Yeah.
Didn't have to justify anything. So, well, this has been insightful, my love. Have you enjoyed this is your debut podcast?
It's been great fun. I think we need to do one on couples. We'll just do a couples podcast.
Maybe I'll get people to submit questions or something.
Inside lesbian land.
Yeah. Dispelling the myths.
Yeah.
But for those of you who are watching or listening to this on your favorite platform, please subscribe so you don't miss an episode. I do try to get them out weekly. I've been a little bit out of cadence. We were away at the start of the week, and then with hectic things, so it's Saturday afternoon now, and my lovely wife is about to head away for a week to do some residential stuff as part of her master's degree. So we thought we'd just sneak this in before she's off and away for the week. But thank you for listening. If you have any comments or questions, please shoot them through. Happy to chat. Or if there's something you want to hear us sort of bounce around the either webs with, then I'm sure that I won't have to work too hard to twist your arm to come back on again, my love.